This is the World Organic News for the week ending 5th of November 2018. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. We begin this week with a great idea from the blog Anna's Good Life entitled How to Double Your Cabbage Crop. Quote, whenever I get to harvest a cabbage, I always leave the stalk and some of the edible leaves in the ground and just clearly slice the head off. A few weeks later, you should be fine that you have a whole bunch of little cabbagelings sprouting from the base. End quote. This quote is worth its weight in gold just for the use of the word cabbagelings, but there is much more than this to this idea. Cabbages, broccoli, lettuce, spinach and silver beet are all plants that respond to the cut and come again philosophy this post is hinting at. So I've had a silver beet plant producing salad leaves for 9 months. It was one of the ugliest things imaginable by the end of its life, and the flavour had become more bitter over time, but it was still quite edible. I think as gardeners we should look for more perennialisation. There's another new word for you this week. Perennial food plants, or at least those that respond well to cut and come again techniques, have many advantages. The latter continue to produce, and they require very little input once the plants are established. In the garden with the ugly silver beet, I experimented with techniques to, if not reverse, but to halt bolting. Some of the lettuce started to bolt with a bout of hot weather. I simply cut off the upward-reaching seed column near the edible leaves and continued to pick those leaves. And this extended the productive period of these lettuce by about a month or two. There are efforts, and have been for quite a few decades, to develop perennial grains, wheat in particular. These have yet to come to very much, but the promise is that of the perennial vegetable. One planting, continuing harvests each year, fodder for stock, a much lower use of chemical fertilisers and surprisingly pesticides. We can all start in our own gardens and let the perennialisation of food continue. We have the fruit plants, strawberries, blueberries and all the soft fruits that are perennials, tree fruits of course. Nuts and other such food sources can be the skeletal structure of our garden beds. We can do this, and these gardens are more resilient than acres of monocultural cauliflowers. They more closely mimic forests, their mycelial structures, their inbuilt reserves for dry spells, and their carbon reserves. Win-win, win-win. Our next post is from Bill Butterworth's blog Land Research, entitled Only Farmers Can Do This. Bill is an advocate for urban waste collection and recycling to agricultural and forestry land, as I've discussed in an earlier episode. And from this post, quote, while attention is often focused on carbon locked up in trees, in fact most of the carbon lies in the soil. Below-ground carbon structures includes an array of sources such as the root systems of trees and soil organic matter. Scientists estimate that by managing the world's land more sustainably, such as by protecting forests and investing in reforestation, we could achieve up to 30% of carbon emission reductions, end quote. The numbers are continually being checked and recalculated, and the speed and efficiency of carbon sequestration through agricultural, particularly regenerative agricultural methods, seems to be increasing as we achieve greater knowledge. When I first heard of this as a method of reversing climate change, I was frankly sceptical, but the numbers seem to stack up. The great advantages of favouring politically this method of carbon sequestration is that it negates the need for a carbon tax. Personally, I find trading carbon credits with the very same institutions which led to the global financial crisis and allowing them to make money through solving the problem the industrial system created quite offensive. If we instead put funding towards re-education, and I know that phrase carries a huge amount of baggage, but directing the funding given to research and development in universities and institutions like the CSIRO in the Cairns Group type countries, and through farm bills or common agricultural policies where those things exist, could have the problem solved well within the 12-year window the IPCC has been talking about this last month. And as Bill states in his title, only farmers can do this. Our next post covers one of the techniques that by its production process sucks carbon out of the air and produces heat for electrical energy production, and then increases soil carbon in its usage. There's an idea. So the post is charcoal production techniques in South Africa from the blog VUTHISA. The charcoal is then spread across or incorporated into the soil through cultivation. Carbon from the air and into the soil. There's an idea. Known as biochar, the charcoal added to the soil significantly increases the surface area in a bizarre way within the soil, as the charcoal is basically a flat surface folded in upon itself many times. The surface area of these charcoal pieces houses soil microbiota in far greater numbers than just soil particles could. The productivity of soil amended with biochar is quite remarkable, and there is archaeological evidence from the Amazon of this being done, at least on small scales, to give life back to the leached-out tropical soils of that area. This particular post discusses two techniques, direct and indirect, that are used for charcoal production in South Africa and goes on to quite some details on how to actually do it yourself. With a little imagination, the heat coming off the direct method units could be scavenged and used for electricity production, or at the very least hot water production. The benefits are many, from just making hot water available. They can be used to make abattoirs cleaner, provide hot water to hospitals, and even cleaning dairies. The possibilities are almost endless. This is the sort of thing I particularly like, as it gives many benefits from the one base process. Our final post this week: plants rely on their residual bacteria to protect them from harmful microbes, is from the blog Mindzilla knowledge portal Beta. Quote, Cologne, Germany. Fungi and other filamentous microbes called umicites cause many devastating plant diseases and are together responsible for more than 10% of all crop losses. A new groundbreaking study shows that even healthy plants host potentially harmful fungi and umicites in plant roots. That they do not succumb to illness is due to the simultaneous presence of a wide range of different co-residing bacteria, which regulate the balance among these different microorganisms in plant roots, and thus ensure plant survival in nature. End quote. I think you all know by now my fascination with microbiota and the role they play in the ecology of life. This particular piece of research gives us a little more info on the way these interact with not just each other but also their plant hosts. This research focuses on the root biota, but as we discussed last month, or maybe the month before, the leaf biota is of equal importance. The whole field is fascinating and supports the need, I would argue, for removing glyphosate from our environment, as well as all the other oil-based agricultural products. The evidence is accumulating, and it points in one direction: regenerative organic agriculture. This is good for the climate, this is good for the soil, for the food we eat and everything living on the planet. Seems to me like it's time. And on that happy note, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Now, as a podcast listener, you may be thinking of producing your own podcast, but you're not sure where to begin. Drop over to mrjohnmoore.com and pick up the free checklists I've written to help get you started. You can also check out the YouTube channel Pod Thoughts for more helpful information. There's a link in the show notes and details at the website mrjohnmoore.com. A transcript of this episode is available at worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week.